Saree's most interesting rivalry has been against Chihiro Hashimoto. Their chemistry together has continually improved throughout the last 5 years. They display a great combination of being able to pull off a credible match where they drag the brutality out of one another, while also being able to reasonably incorporate explosive, high-energy sequences, largely featuring high-impact moves that fit the general theme of their intense battles. Normally, Sareee would have the advantage in this matchup because she debuted 4 years sooner, but while Hashimoto passed the Sendai Girls entrance exam at 15, she was urged by President Jinsei Shinzaki to take up either judo or amateur wrestling for a half a year until she finished 9th grade. Hashimoto quickly excelled at amateur wrestling and wound up staying in school. She won the Asian Junior Championship at 67 kilograms and placed 3rd in the All Japan Wrestling Championships, which resulted in her going on to college to continue her amateur career. She finished 3rd in the World Student Championship, but while her hopes of making the 2016 Summer Olympic team were dashed, she did shockingly defeat Meiko Satomura to win the Sendai Girls World title just over a year after her 2015 pro debut, an accomplishment that's virtually unheard of in a culture built around paying your dues. Sareee still managed to win the title of her promotion, Diana, at a younger age, being 22 years old when she defeated founder Kyoko Inoue on July 22, 2018, as Hashimoto didn't even turn pro until she was 23. Nonetheless, Sareee giving up about 45 pounds to such a dominant amateur wrestler who took the pro world by storm has put Sareee in the role of chasing Hashimoto throughout the series. Their first run of 5 singles matches took place between June 28, 2018 and October 13, 2019, with Hashimoto going 2-1-2. Unfortunately, we don't have footage of their 2 matches in Diana, but the final 2 matches of that leg of the series, where Sareee temporarily unified the Diana and Sendai Girls titles on June 8, 2019, only to lose just the Sendai Girls title back to Hashimoto on October 13th, are very good matches that are well worth seeking out. Sareee was a different wrestler during this period, still figuring out her style. Even though Sareee got her first win over Hashimoto here, it wasn't particularly convincing, partially because Sareee was doing a lot more of the Manami Toyota inspired clapping and missile kicking in those days. And it wasn't really believable seeing Sareee come back with this type of offense after Hashimoto controlled the early portion with her size, strength, and amateur wrestling skill. These two also weren't that good at telling a story at this point. Sareee could temporarily append Hashimoto with a dropkick or an arm drag, but couldn't maintain these advantages, and had no answer to Hashimoto's wrestling, which led to Hashimoto having to just abandon her strengths and miss athletic moves so Sareee could mount a comeback. They certainly did nice sequences, but never answered the question of how Sareee could actually win from either a technical or strategic standpoint. Sareee simply displayed enough heart, willpower, and determination to kind of make you believe in her. Most of these issues are still present, though to a lesser degree, as Sareee has become more credible both in style and in presentation. The second portion of the feud began on May 16, 2023, with Saree's first match back in Japan. Although Sareee wasted a few years doing nothing useful in Florida, she was more certain about the wrestler she wanted to be going forward, tightening up her moveset along the lines of Toshiaki Kawada to feature more credible and realistic offense that makes the match feel more like a fight. Sareee now carries herself better and feels more believable. The latest 2 Sareee vs Hashimoto matches have been more attrition-based heavyweight style contests, which has worked well because high-impact wrestling was their strength to begin with. Sareee was rusty early on in this May match, having not had a match of any sort in more than 9 months. Suddenly going 23 minutes 27 seconds after only having one match longer than 10 minutes during her entire 2-year WWE stint was a lot to ask of herself. Ultimately, while this wasn't the most exciting match in the series, the improved storytelling featuring Sareee injuring Hashimoto's arm resulted in it being the one I was most invested in, and it was the first one that really felt like Sareee could reasonably win, even though she didn't. Saree's stock has continued to rise since then, outlasting seedling ace Arisa Nakajima in a brutal war that was one of the standout Joshi matches of 2023, to win the Beyond the Sea title on August 25th. In fact, Saree's last singles loss was the one to Hashimoto she was looking to avenge tonight. The early portion of that May match wasn't that strong, and it lacked a big push at the climax, but these were some of the issues that were remedied tonight. This January 16, 2024 encounter from Sareee Produce, Sareee-ISM Chapter III at Tokyo Shinjuku FACE was their best match. It's more along the lines of the classic 90s All Japan heavyweight style, a hard-hitting, slow-building, story-oriented match with a dramatic progression that makes it seem more exciting than it probably actually is. It wasn't bogged down by all the modern stalling aspects that have turned that once great style into a tedious cliche and parody of itself, though. This was still a classic Joshi match in that they got down to business and worked hard throughout, even though they focused on impact rather than pace. The tension was simmering even before the opening bell. You could tell Sareee had been waiting for this moment for a long time. She had a lot of grand aspirations of how the match was going to go this time. She had every intention of standing up to Hashimoto, but when the stare down was over, Hashimoto just took her right down. Sareee responded by grabbing the ropes out of spite, but Hashimoto decided not to recognize the rope break and pulled her back into the center of the ring. Sareee wound up fighting the early portion from underneath. They continued to play these little games with each other, with Hashimoto thwarting Sareee at every turn. For instance, Sareee dropped down when Hashimoto ran the ropes, but instead of charging over her, Hashimoto jumped down on top of Sareee into a headlock. Sareee drop-kicked Hashimoto to the floor, but here we got the last vestiges of her Manami Toyota offense as she wasted time clapping. By the time she ascended for her dive, Hashimoto was back in the ring, throwing her off the top rope. They eventually redid this segment, with Sareee being a bit more urgent and hitting the plancha. Sareee coming back with flying moves after previously getting cut off after just about anything she managed to do wasn't the most believable aspect of a match that was largely about the struggle. Hashimoto's initial dominance certainly felt necessary for the story of Sareee overcoming the odds they were telling, and I'm sure they felt they needed to spice things up because the early segment of Hashimoto's control wasn't super exciting. Mostly everything from this point onwards was gas, though. There was a nice spot where Hashimoto almost came back catching Sareee in a fireman's carry, but Sareee kept struggling to avoid the slam, eventually maneuvering into an octopus since she is channeling Antonio Inoki these days. Saree's avalanche sunset flip powerbomb had been thwarted earlier, but she landed a variation for the first huge move, sunset flipping her way out of a Suisha Otoshi onto the apron, and powerbombing Hashimoto off the apron to the floor. This spot was a bit awkward though, because Sareee had to turn 90 degrees after the sunset flip to position herself so she could bomb Hashimoto off the apron. Sareee followed with a foot stop off the barrier. She tried her Uranagi off the ramp, but Hashimoto avoided, and wound up hoisting her up and charging into the crowd for a running tackle through a row of seats. This led to the requisite countout tease. Hashimoto hit a big spear back in the ring, but Sareee avoided the last ride powerbomb for all she was worth, fighting Hashimoto off with repeated headbutts until Hashimoto fell, and continuing to throw one headbutt after another until the ref finally pulled her off to check if Hashimoto was still conscious. They seemed to be starting Saree's arm work with a wakigatame counter, but Hashimoto answered with similar urgency to what Sareee was showing each time Hashimoto tried to throw her, and they instead moved to the finishing burst. Neither would relent though, still avoiding or countering most of the power moves, answering each other's strikes, and refusing to submit. While in storyline they eventually ran out of energy, they still kept going on willpower, exchanging elbows until both collapsed after a double headbutt. Hashimoto recovered from the double cell first, and hit her big wheelbarrow suplex. Sareee came back to life just in time to counter the powerbomb, but while she was fighting off the German suplex, Hashimoto switched into a sleeper hold and nearly put her out. Hashimoto eventually let go in favor of trying to finish with the last ride, but Sareee kicked out just in time. Sareee came back countering into the crucifix bomb, and hit a series of uranagis, eventually finishing with the wrist clutch exploder. This finish wasn't too dissimilar from Saree's previous win on June 8, 2019, but the finishing stretch was a lot more violent, and they did a better job of conveying that she outlasted Hashimoto this time. Sareee had a lot more momentum coming into this match, and just feels like a bigger star at this point, even if partially because there aren't many big fishes these days, especially ones in their prime. This and the January 4th Mayu Iwatani vs. Shuri match are the best women's singles bouts thus far in 2024. Mayu vs. Shuri is a faster paced, flashier, and more spectacular spot fest, while this is a better developed, harder hitting, more credible story oriented match. I rate this match 4 out of 5 stars.